All right, welcome to The Explainer. Today we are jumping right into a foundational story from Genesis. And let me tell you, it's a story that has it all. We're talking family betrayal, incredible suffering, and this constant, kind of mysterious presence of divine intervention.
Okay, let's kick things off with this one line. Behold, this dreamer cometh. Now, when Joseph's brothers say this, you gotta understand, it's not a friendly greeting. Not at all. This is an insult just dripping with sarcasm and envy. And this one little phrase, muttered from a distance, it's basically the match that lights the fuse on a family tragedy that is going to change everything.
So here's how we're going to break this down. We'll start with the stories of two key brothers. Then we'll look for God in the details. And after that, we'll dig into the rules of this world, both for relating to God and to each other. We'll even touch on the rules that aren't there.
All right, first up, a tale of two brothers. We're talking betrayal, deceit, and some serious moral tests.
So Joseph's story is just this incredibly fast, brutal downward spiral. It all starts with his father's favoritism, right? That famous coat. That alone is enough to make his brothers absolutely hate him. But then Joseph, in what you might call youthful arrogance, basically pours gasoline on the fire. He starts sharing these dreams he's having where his whole family is bowing down to him. You can imagine how well that went over. So all that envy just boils over, they catch him in the wilderness, strip him of the coat, toss him in a pit, and finally, at Judah's suggestion, remember that, they sell him off for 20 pieces of silver.
And this is where the narrative does something really interesting. Right as Joseph is starting this journey of integrity under pressure, the story just hits the brakes and pivots hard to his brother, Judah. So while Joseph is resisting temptation and staying righteous, we get this whole side story about Judah completely failing. He sells his own brother, he messes up his family duties, he gets deceived himself. It's like the text is deliberately putting these two guys, these two paths, right next to each other, forcing you to ask, what's going on here?
Okay, section 2, God in the narrative. Because with all this human drama, you have to ask, where is God in all this? He feels like the unseen main character.
Okay, this phrase right here is the absolute key. It shows up over and over again. It doesn't matter where Joseph is, whether he's a slave in a powerful man's house or a prisoner locked away in a dungeon, the text keeps repeating it. The Lord was with Joseph. This is a huge signal. It tells us God isn't some distant spectator. He is an active participant. And it's not like his presence is a reward for good circumstances. It's a constant, even when Joseph hits absolute rock bottom.
So when you put it all together, what kind of picture of God do these chapters paint? Well, first, he's present. He's actively with Joseph. He's also a just judge, and we see that clearly when he deals with the wickedness of Judah's sons, and Onan. He's a source of blessing. I mean, everything Joseph does seems to prosper because of this. He's merciful, showing Joseph favor even in prison. And finally, he's the revealer of secrets, the true source of insight, which Joseph himself admits when he talks about interpreting dreams.
All right. Section 3, Rules for Relating to God. Okay, so if God is this present and this active, what are the rules of engagement? How are people supposed to interact with him? Well, the text suggests there's this direct line of moral accountability to God. It seems to boil down to a few core duties. First, you have to acknowledge his power, his sovereignty. When the prisoners are freaking out about their dreams, what's the first thing Joseph says? Don't interpretations belong to God? He points right to the source. Second, you have to avoid sinning against God. Notice how Joseph frames the temptation with Potiphar's wife. It's not just about betraying his boss, he calls it a great wickedness and sin against God. And third, it's about living righteously, because the story makes it pretty clear God blesses that and he judges the opposite.
Okay, moving on to section 4, Rules for Relating to Others. And of course, this accountability to God doesn't happen in a vacuum. It directly shapes how people are expected to treat each other.
To understand what happens next, you have to know about this custom called levirate marriage. Basically, it was a man's duty to marry his brother's widow if she was childless, all to provide an heir for the family line. This isn't just a side detail. The whole Judah and Tamar story hinges on it. Onan refuses to do it, and God punishes him for it. Then Judah fails to uphold his end of the bargain, which is what forces Tamar into this incredibly desperate and risky plan.
So if you map out everyone's actions, the good and the bad, the moral code of this world really starts to come into focus. There's a clear rule against murder. Reuben is the one who steps in and says, "Shed no blood." Fulfilling your family duty is a huge deal. There's a strong standard for sexual morality. And even though there's so much deception, the story ultimately shows that honesty and justice win out.
And just to see how seriously they took these rules, listen to this. When Judah thinks his daughter-in-law Tamar has been immoral, he says, "Bring her forth and let her be burned." I mean, wow, a swift, brutal sentence. And the hypocrisy is just staggering, because this is coming from the very man who, not long before, solicited a prostitute himself. It really shows you the high stakes.
But then comes this incredible turning point. Because when Tamar proves that he is the father, Judah has a choice. And he doesn't try to cover it up. He publicly confesses. He says, "She had been more righteous than I." He admits that his sin, failing in his duty to her, was actually the greater crime. It is this powerful public moment of reckoning, and it really feels like the beginning of a change for him.
Okay, our final section, the unwritten rules. Because, sometimes what a text doesn't talk about is just as important as what it does. So think about it. This whole story is full of farming and flocks and grain and bread, but in these specific chapters, there are absolutely no divine commands about what people should or shouldn't eat. There are no environmental laws. For all the rules about how to treat God and other people, there's a complete silence here on dietary or land stewardship rules. So, let's tie this all together. What are the big takeaways here? Well, these stories are way more than just ancient drama. They're a really complex moral lesson. On one hand, they show that human flaws, we're talking jealousy, deceit, you name it, are the root cause of so much pain and suffering. But on the other hand, they paint a picture of God as an active player who is right there in the middle of the hardship, who judges sin and who rewards faithfulness. It's a world where your choices have real, tangible consequences, both for the people around you and for your standing with God.
And that really leaves us with the central question that just hangs over this entire narrative, doesn't it? It's the big one. In these stories, where exactly does human responsibility end, and where does divine will begin? How much of this is all part of some grand divine plan, and how much is just the messy result of our own flawed human choices?